This is for upkeep. This is for getting rid of those dead ends if you sit at home and cannot afford to go see the professionals. Now, to show you what I'm talking about. So excuse me while I disappear from the camera, or if you see my ugly armpits and everything, I've been losing a lot of weight again, so now my skin's hanging. So hi, let me fly away. Just like where you position your ponytail, as everybody keeps calling it, is going to depend very greatly on how your layers are going to fall. But I can't begin to stress enough. You gotta try to get it as slick and tight as possible, and you are actually going to need at least 2 hair bands for the way that I do it. When you're brushing it out, make sure you're brushing it on both sides, both what you see when you flip over, and on the back end that's going to end up being forward. For my method, you're going to want to put the ponytail right on the edge of your hairline, but that's because I like extreme layers. The farther back you go, the less extreme your layers are going to be. But you also need to remember, the farther back you go, the more likely... Hey. Don't it look funny? See kind of where the old edge was? Anyway. For the first one, like I said, you want to try to get it as flat as you can. Obviously, doing this, you're not going to get it perfect. You want to try to get it as flat as you possibly can. Okay, that's just fun. Anyway. Now, something else to keep in mind when doing this. Whatever you're going to chop off, you can roughly see where the last one was. You can see that it's not a perfect edge, but I'm going to show you why it bows out a little bit this way. When you go to put it off, where you're going to chop again, I'm only going to do like this real little bit right here just so I can get rid of some of these dead ends. But when you're going for this part, don't hold it down here or out here. When you're going to put the second one on, which is how you measure it to make sure it's somewhat even, go back. You've already pulled all your hair forward. If you forward it any more, that is going to cause the extreme layers. It's also how you end up with that blunt edge like he was talking about in the videos. You want to pull it as far back as you can before you put on the hairband. See? Now when you drop it forward, see the bulge? That's because you pulled it back to kind of help even out where the actual layers are going to be. Just like when you're pulling it to the length that you want, obviously that's too much for me. I like to keep my length. Pull it back. Pull the hair tie to the rough length of what you're willing to cut off. It's okay if some of your natural hair falls out at this point. You're only marking where you're going to be cutting. But like I said, you can see the bulge is going to make a more even layer. I'm only cutting off this little bit. Now, my method, I cut underneath where this hair tie is. That way it's all together, still in that one little bunch where all the cut ends are going to be, so you can even it out. Now, since I don't have a fancy salon and I don't feel like going out and sweeping up all my hair in a minute, I'm going to do this over the toilet seat. You might not see it. But when you're going in, instead of going straight, unless you don't mind that rough edge, just do this. Yes, I'm actually cutting. You go in at an angle. It gives you a little bit more room for error. It makes it uneven, so that way your layers are less likely to be jagged. They're probably still going to be if you don't make sure you pull where it needs to. For me, when I'm pulling off a lot, I will actually go about a centimeter below where it is. Chop it out. As you see, it's still there. There's still plenty of room to where the hair tie is. Like I said, I'm just getting rid of dead ends. And now you go in at the angle. Get those edges uneven while it's still tied together and it can't fly away on you. There's probably a technical term out there, but I call it fluffing. Also, just a side note, go from the angle, because when you cut straight across, there's going to be a little bit more from whether you're right or left-handed. On one side, it's actually going to be a little bit longer than the other. That's actually where I start and put the angle against it. So that way, as it's going up, as you see, it's not as much here, but it's a little deeper here to kind of even it out. Only downside to this, or at least I've noticed as long as I've been doing it, which has been quite a bit of time by this point, I have noticed that when you do your hair like this, your dead ends will actually come back pretty quick. So if you have the money to afford the good stuff, keep that from happening, I strongly advise it so that way you can get your hair the repair that it needs. And obviously, if you like that blunt cut edge, this is not what you do. I don't. I also like doing this because it frays it out. Now, this is going to sound a little weird and crazy, but with it like this, there's actually consistency that I'm looking for. I happen to be an artist, more of a special effects makeup artist, and I'm a regular artist, jack of all trades. There's actually consistency I'm looking for when I'm doing this, because as you feather it out, it will actually start to lose that strong thickness. Right now, it would feel like an acrylic brush if you just cut it. If you know what I'm talking about, it will feel like one of those regular acrylic brushes that you use for painting and everything else. The consistency I'm more trying to find, for those of you girls out there that know what I'm talking about, the second best, this is going to get on my nerves. I've done what I wanted. I'll show you guys in a minute what it looks like. Anyway, one of those cheap Walmart packer brushes. Go ahead, laugh away. One of the cheap packer brushes. That's about what it feels like right now. That's fine for me. I could live with it. But what you really want it to feel like by the time you're done is so it's soft and everything, which by this point, if you've wet your hair because it's really wavy or curly, it should be starting to dry, at least at the tips. You want it to feel more like that e.l.f. brush that they have at Walmart. I'm going for us cheapies because obviously if we're doing this at home, we can't afford to go to the professionals. You want it soft, and that's actually about what you want it to look like too. You want it to be somewhat symmetrical, but you also want it to be soft and a gradient. You want it to feel natural, not... Now you see that thick line? If I turn to the side, you'll see that it's angled. Also, if you look at it, my hair naturally flays out, which works for me. But you will also see that it's not completely blunt straight. You'll see that there is some variant from me chopping in like I was. Now, take the second hair tie out, flip it back. It's where I normally part mine. It's all fluffy, I gotta brush it out. But you can actually see what he's been talking about while my hair is still fluffed out. Normally right about here is where that blunt edge is, which for me it's semi there. I've left most of the length that I wanted, and once I brush it out, it won't be as bad. Instead of a straight line, I do still have it for the most part, but instead of it being a blunt straight edge, there is some gradient going on to where it's not that bad. Is it professional? Fuck no, it's not. We're not going for professional, we're going for upkeep, because we're broke and we can't afford to go see people for our hair. Now, if you brush it out, which believe it or not, the other part of doing this at home is not just the cut itself, it's actually your upkeep. go. Now you see how there's still that little bit of the blunt edge, but there is enough up here in the front, even right here all the way at the front, there is enough for there to be a gradient. Is it still fairly sharp? Yes. Normally what I do for this instance is I actually follow the line of my bangs, because I cut my bangs, I literally just take the part that I want and I cut it at an angle. That way this side is always long enough to go behind my ear, but that's besides the point. But I follow my bangs in just a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. This is when you would razor it or you would cut it. This is where I'm probably going to hear every professional out there yelling at me. Barely. I'm actually squeezing it just a little bit just so I can actually cut it at that angle. And doing it that way, it's basically like razoring it without actually razoring it. But the key to this is to do as little as possible, so that way you're not making a huge blunt edge. Like right now, if I'm looking in the mirror image of the video, I would just need this part right here. That way it's framing the face. The layers follow a kind of a pattern. But again, once you wash your hair out, a lot of this is actually going to go away. Some of this is actually still the dead hair. But it takes some of the edge off. That way it has, to about here, a natural gradient that goes all the way down to almost the same length as the back of my hair. Mind you, I've got most of it pulled forward. So that way you don't have that blunt, crisp edge that everybody keeps talking about in the videos. You get the layers that you want, but you're basically just doing upkeep on your bangs, on your layers and everything else until you can afford to go see them. And as you see, it honestly doesn't look that different from when I was cutting it a minute ago. That's on purpose. This is something for upkeep. This is not some extravagant way to make your hair look brand new and reborn. This is just upkeep. That's all it is. Only thing I don't like about doing all that is I lose a lot of the blonde that was in there that's supposed to gradient. That's besides the point. Anyway. Probably going to cut out a lot of my rambling and edits. But that's how I do it. Pretty simple, pretty easy. And it really doesn't look that bad. And it looks fairly natural. Believe it or not, this is about what my hair does when I keep it up in a ponytail all day anyway. If you keep your hair up all the time, you're going to have uneven layers. It's going to end up at some point or another breaking off. It's not going to look right. Believe it or not, it's better to keep your hair down as much as you can, just like it's better to take care of it properly. I'm not one of the ones that does it. But not that bad. So, Brad, tell me how bad I botched my hair. Tell me how horrible of a job I did. What I think would be awesome and would be a great series for you, and this is a challenge, is to start looking at these videos on YouTube instead of just reacting to them. React to them and find ways to better it, to where those of us that can't afford to go to a salon can kind of have a little semi-mini ground, and maybe you can figure out ways to show us how to do some stuff at home. Take what you watch and make it better. That way you can also help those that, totally botch their hair so they can feel a little better about themselves if they got a learning experience. We all have to go there at some point. Thank you guys for joining me. This is Harley Quinn Sane, and I'm signing out.